Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPad Pro is my go-to device when I'm not editing videos. It typically gets more use than my iPhone 15 Pro Max at times, and I use it for everything when not making and editing those videos. I use a Mac for that instead. Now that the M2 iPad Pro has been out for well over a year, or over 430 days at the time of this video, I've used it every single day since its release, and I thought we could take a look at things such as durability, scratches, the display, and how the iPad Pro 12.9 battery health and battery life have held up over that time. Now, the iPad Pro 12.9 M2 released on October 22nd, 2022. I did a separate unboxing on that, and like I said, it's been my main device. Currently, I'm at 42% battery, and we'll talk more about that a little bit as battery health has declined a bit. But as far as the specs, this is the 12.9 inch, like I said, with Wi-Fi and cellular, and it also has 1 terabyte of storage. So if we go into our storage here, you can see we have 1 terabyte. I'm using 143.06 gigabytes. That goes up and down depending on what I'm doing. Final Cut Pro typically will use a lot if I was actually using that regularly. I did try it out once it released, but I haven't regularly used it since. The overall design, I really love this design. In fact, it's my favorite Apple product currently. It's pretty simple, squared off, of course, with our speakers on each side, our power sleep wake button at the top, which I rarely use since I just open it up and use it with the Magic Keyboard. We also have our volume buttons, an Apple Pencil that I have attached at the top. I also do have cellular with this one, and then we've, of course, have USB-C, millimeter wave antennas, and everything else. So pretty typical of what we've had for a while. We do expect a redesign probably in 2024, so we'll have to wait and see with that. But as far as the overall durability of this, we'll talk more about not just the durability of the iPad, but also the durability of the Magic Keyboard as well, as I've used this with the M1 iPad as well. So there's some things to mention there. Now, I do use a Magic Keyboard with it, and that adds rigidity, so I haven't really had any issues with it flexing. It's been nice and safe in here. This protects it. I don't use a screen protector, and the keyboard keeps it safe there as well, for the most part. And I'll show you scratches in a moment, because it does have a few. But this keeps it nice and rigid. I don't have any issues with it flexing. As you may have seen online, it is very easy to break if you want to flex this. If you sat on it, you would definitely break it. And you can actually see it flex if I twist it just a little bit with ever so slight pressure. It actually twists in my hand. So it's something that is very seemingly fragile, but as long as you're careful, it's not really an issue. Like I said, I don't use a screen protector, and I do have some scratches on it. So if I turn the screen off, I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's some very light scratches right here. I'm not sure if you can see that in this light, but there's some light scratches right here that I don't notice when the screen is on, but they're definitely there, and I see some new ones from time to time. This scratch right here is probably the most annoying one, as I'm not sure where it came from. You can definitely see it if the screen is off, but once the screen is on, it sort of disappears. So it's not too big of an issue, especially given its age, over a year at this point. Now, like I said, I keep it in the Magic Keyboard all the time. It's either on my desk or there, so I'm not sure where that came from. If I'm moving or traveling, it's in a backpack. So again, I'm not sure where that came from, but it seems to hold up pretty well. I would say I have less scratches than I do on my 15 Pro Max. This one actually has a screen protector, but the one I don't have it on has a lot of scratches, and I've barely used it. Now, as far as battery life and battery health, well, the battery health is actually down a little bit on this one. Based off Coconut Battery, we have 89.3% health with 203 battery cycles. Based on what I had at 6 months, I had 76 cycles and 99% battery health. So now we're down to 89.3. I would expect a little less battery, and I do run betas on this as well, but if we go to battery, you have to use something like Coconut Battery. It's a Mac app that's free to download, but outside the App Store. You'll see here I have 4 hours and 11 minutes of screen on time, 30 minutes of screen off time, but typically I'll get about 6 hours total of screen on time with this device. It's supposed to get 10. It's never really gotten me 10, especially since it's the cellular version, but usually I'll get around 6 to 8, depending on if it was newer. Now it's closer to 6 at this point. So you'll see pretty much I've charged it every time. 5 hours and 49 minutes was good one day, 6 hours and 35 minutes the other day. So pretty good battery life, but not phenomenal and not what I would like to get out of an iPad. Maybe a few more hours would be nice. But again, it is getting a little bit older. Give it a few years, it should get down to about 80% battery health. We can't really replace the batteries very easily in this, so that part's a little concerning, but it is a pretty large battery overall. Now, the display is one of the best things Apple makes. I love this display. It's super bright. It looks great. It's great for HDR movies. So if you're using something such as Apple TV or Apple TV Plus, if you go into this here, maybe play one of these. Any of these HDR movies looks great. Any of their HDR TV shows looks great. Put it on full brightness. You've got very deep blacks, very bright highlights. And of course, we do have that blooming issue, but that's more noticeable on maybe a black background if you're working with something such as Pixelmator or something along those lines. Typically, you're not going to see that. But to show you, if I go into Safari, on a pure black background, even in this light, I can't see any blooming on the display. If I turn the lights off, you still can't really see it unless you turn the brightness way up, then you can kind of see it around the actual icon. Otherwise, it's very hard to notice at all, where there's just not really blooming that shows up unless you're actually on a very bright display and a very deep black background. So I know some people have been concerned about that. It's really not an issue for me, as I rarely see it unless it's a very deep black background, a movie or something, and then you move the mouse cursor. Otherwise, I never notice it. It will be a concern for some, but most of the time it really just sort of disappears and I don't notice it. As far as the hover feature with the Apple Pencil, since that's one of the newer features that comes with this iPad, it's something I never really use, but it's nice to have there. If you're using the pencil and maybe hovering over something, you want to know if you select it, select maybe the App Store or something else. It's nice that it's there. It's definitely nice if you draw a lot, use Procreate or something like that, but it's not something that I have to have or I would run out and buy this for. As far as the use of external monitors, when I tried to use Final Cut Pro, I was a bit disappointed in that it just didn't support the actual resolution properly. Things didn't look right. It just didn't work as I would have expected. Maybe it's a little bit better now, but it's just not to the point where I would want to use it full time as my main editing device. Yes, I could use it as far as its performance. The M2 is super fast. We have that 100 gigabyte per second memory bandwidth, ProRes encoding, and all those decode engines, as well as hardware accelerated H.264 and HEVC, ProRes RAW. It's super capable, but Final Cut Pro needs a few updates so I can use some plugins with it so I could use it full time on the go. So it's definitely capable. It didn't hardly get hot when I edited a video on it. It was great to use. Cellular and Wi-Fi and everything seem to work well, and you'll see we're already dropping the percentage pretty quickly here with the battery, but cellular and Wi-Fi work fine, no real issues there. I've actually been pretty happy with it. Software has definitely improved with the iPad now that we have Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro. I would like to see a little bit more effort from third-party plugins to implement their plugins into it, but for the most part, it's pretty great. You'll see my home screen layout is pretty simple. In fact, I only have one page now, and I just have basic apps that I use regularly. I use the app Craft to actually record my notes for different videos and ideas. I use YouTube, of course, and Apple TV, and just maybe some idea apps that I'll use for that. Pretty simple with news, podcasts, and things for information such as X or Twitter, Telegram, Discord, and more. So I use it very much for information, planning, things like that. And of course, to look at the weather, that's the only widget I have. It's pretty boring, but very focused, and that's what I like about it. I'll use Safari for research, use my mail, files, and things like that, and nothing else. I'm very focused typically when using this device. Now, as far as the Magic Keyboard, it's actually held up pretty well. In fact, this is the Magic Keyboard from my M1 iPad. Since it fit on this one, I just carried it over. I like this one quite a bit. I had the black version of this before. This one is holding up pretty well, and considering it's over 950 days old, since May 21st, 2021, it's held up pretty well. We do have some staining on it that won't go away. There's a little nick there in the actual cover, but it's protected my iPad, and in general, it's held up pretty well considering its age. If we open it up from everyday use, you'll see there's a few stains in here, but I do clean it regularly, and the keyboard works pretty well. You'll see I have some wear on the A key, which typically wears off on my keyboards just from using it so much, but it is wearing down a little bit. Otherwise, everything still works just fine. I haven't really had any issues with it, and I use it every day along with my iPad. So I've been pretty impressed. Maybe around the edges it's getting a little bit rough. I'm looking forward to maybe a redesign or something new, but I have cleaned this and it does seem to be maybe peeling a little bit now, but it is holding up pretty well considering it's used just about every single day. Now, if you're wondering if you should upgrade to an M2 iPad Pro, at this point, I probably would not. And the reason I say that is if you don't have one already, I would probably skip this and wait for the next version that's expected very soon. Apple is expected actually to launch a new iPad Pro with maybe an OLED display, so that could benefit from not having that blooming issue, and maybe eventually we'll get micro LED as many had thought we'd get with this. But if you're wondering if you should upgrade to it, I probably wouldn't. If you have an older iPad and you're thinking of an iPad Pro, and you see a deal on this, well, then it's probably worth upgrading to if you don't care about having the latest. It's super fast. It's great to use. Maybe in the future we'll have maybe a little bit better battery, maybe from the OLED display or something else. But in general, I love this device. Maybe they'll make it out of titanium to make it a little bit more rigid, but I hope they don't increase the price as it's already very expensive, as this was around $2,000, not to mention the keyboard itself. So I also wouldn't upgrade if hover doesn't matter to you and maybe you have an M1 iPad Pro. Hover is a great feature on the Apple Pencil, but it's not something I would upgrade to unless you draw constantly. If it matters, it's a nice update. Otherwise, if you don't use the pencil a lot, it's not a reason to upgrade. I still love this iPad. I use it every single day, like I said. I'm just a little bit disappointed at this point at the battery, but again, it will take maybe a different operating system or something else. This will be supported well into the future, so I'll continue to use it regularly, and we'll see if the next version of the iPad Pro, maybe the M3, is actually worth updating from this to that. So going from M1 to M2 is not a big enough upgrade for most people, but either way, it's a great device, and I highly recommend it. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do, and if you have any other questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below about the iPad Pro. If you haven't subscribed already, though, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.